right, guys, so you've heard a few of them have the ability to speak and share some of their thoughts. Now we thought we'd get this amazing panel together. The thought behind this is really diversity of thought. We have these unique perspectives, so we want to hear each and every one of them, hear their viewpoints, and kind of take some broad topics and then drill down and get a little bit more linear. So to the panel, first of all, I want to ask you guys, who here is yay and who is nay on cryptocurrency or Bitcoin?
Yay.
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 Knew that one was coming.
Yay.
Yay.
I mean, I'll split it down the middle.
Okay, 50-50.
Yeah, I'm clearly a nay, so.
Okay. Okay, so to the panel of naysayers, we're going to take any good college debate. You should be able to argue both sides, right? So to our naysayer, why could Bitcoin succeed?
I guess I should, okay.
You're it. You're the naysayer.
So, let me give you one possibility that I don't believe in, but still, if governments proved me wrong and if we started to have hyperinflations breaking out all over the place, then a lot of the argument I just made would go away. But I think more fundamentally, Bitcoin succeeding could just mean that it retains a lot of value, and if in fact it can take on the role that $100 bills and gold play in the current economy, that's enough. If it totally takes over those things, that means that it's actually undervalued now. I don't think that's going to happen, but you can tell the story. And there are some people who share my view that it's never going to take on the role of a means of payment. It's never going to replace ordinary money as a medium of exchange, but think that Bitcoin, although most of them say only Bitcoin among the cryptocurrencies, will retain value because it will be basically the preferred means of payment for drugs and assassinations and tipping elections and that sort of thing.
What I'd say about that is that the technological limitations of Bitcoin are real. The slow transaction speed, the problems in closing transactions and writing blocks that sometimes takes 20 minutes or more, that makes it unusable in a modern payment global economy.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that my company's base a lot of our technology using XRP, which will do 2,000 to 4,000 transactions a second.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That suddenly makes things possible. So I think that the store of value argument and the functionality of our argument, we're so early, in such early days. There's so much store of value conversation. As an investor, when I was a money manager, I just don't like store value investments. I think buying gold, I realize people have done it for centuries, but it seems like a really stupid investment to me. Yeah. You're only buying it with the notion that someone's going to, greater fool theory. And I think that cryptocurrencies, if their only function is store of value, it's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense that there are that many fools around, although certainly there are a lot of fools around. But I think that when and if there is a proven functionality around moving value digitally, and I think we're doing that at Ripple. We've moved over, $1 billion across borders. We've got 100 banks that are actively using our software and to move value across borders in a very inefficient global banking system. Then you've got a solution. You've got something that will create intrinsic value, as will other developers on the platform.
So, Paul, you and I had an interesting conversation. I'm so sorry.
Oh, I just wanted to add, and I think both your comments make a lot of sense, but I think Coinmetrics just published something really interesting yesterday, that Bitcoin settled transactions on chain exceeded physically delivered gold for the first time.
I'm sorry, what, sorry?
So there's more on-chain Bitcoin used for settlements than gold used for physical settlements across all gold exchanges. So in a strange way, it looks like the market is already starting to treat Bitcoin as a store value.
I would just say that gold is hopeless as a means of settlement, and Bitcoin is not hopeless. It's just clunky.
Less hopeless?
Yeah, less hopeless. And so I'm not sure that's a terrifically, that's kind of not a huge threshold. On the other hand, gold has, 5,000 years of validation, which is hard to overcome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you and I had an interesting conversation when we were prepping for this, and you had shared with me, it's not that you're a huge naysayer, you just haven't heard the compelling argument of what question is this fundamentally answering.
Yeah, that's what I've been trying to say. There's we have a system which is which solves the problem. How do I know that this green piece of paper with a dead president or this set of ones and zeros is actually worth something, is actually worth what it says it's worth? We have a system that basically deals with that by repeated games. We have institutions that have reputations and which honor, which you can normally trust because they have a reputation to uphold. That's a system that, you know, works pretty well. And if you, the whole point of cryptocurrency is to find a way to not rely on that. You don't have to rely on anybody being trustworthy, although in fact, in practice, you do. But the, which is a fairly, you know, it's a difficult fix. Why? Has the reputation-based system actually failed? And most of us don't think it has. I think it's actually working pretty well.
But I don't think that's the whole argument about the existence of a digital asset. Isn't just that it's Bitcoin number one, but not that it's replacing fiat. Certainly, that's something some people get really excited about, and there's a lot of conversations about it, and they're very loud conversations. But I think the notion of value being digital is something that, you know, we live in an era when I can send a text message to a friend in Rome in 10 seconds with emojis and a GIF attached to it. Or I can send an email with an Excel spreadsheet to Cape Town in seconds. But we can't transfer value. We can't transfer money in less than, you know, the World Bank says it costs 531 basis points to move money across borders. The average time is 2 to 5 days. That's ridiculous in the technological era we live in. But the problems with settlement, the problems with converting fiat currency, the problems with the global banking system that makes that slow and onerous in technology that dates the 1970s can be fixed with digital technologies, and that's something my company is certainly focused on, as are others.
Except, can I just say, I mean, lots of people, most of them half my age, but lots of people, or less than half my age, are constantly making constant transfers of funds using nothing but their mobile phones. So we actually have, the trans-border stuff is a peculiar thing, which has to do with jurisdictions and currencies and so on. But it's not as if we don't actually have digital transfers of purchasing power.
You're talking about Venmo and Zelle, but those are lovely front ends. But the back end settlement still takes days.
But does anyone care? I mean, the person who pays with Venmo doesn't care what's going on the back end. It's cheap. It's efficient.
Hey, gentlemen, if I may, not to interrupt,
yeah, sorry.
One second.
To extend on the question, please.
I am. Lily, I really want to bring you into this conversation. So you have a very unique perspective to this panel with your position as special agent to the DOJ and the cybercrimes unit. So can you share a little bit about just how you perceive this through your lens?
Well, from my perspective in law enforcement, as well as blockchain analysis in forensics, I would say that Bitcoin has already succeeded in the most popular use case, or I wouldn't say popular, but the most obvious use case, which is criminal activity. That's kind of how it started. I'm not saying that it's a good thing. The majority of Bitcoin use is, it's pretty much stupid price speculation. There's nothing really to it. Nobody is really using it to transfer value unless you're, a techie libertarian or something. But in terms of actual use case, there is a subset of society, of our society, that finds it useful and has found it useful for 5 years or 5 or 6 years. In terms of why, there is a perceived anonymity associated with Bitcoin. I would disagree with that. Obviously, based on what I do, is one of my main tasks is to de-anonymize cryptocurrency users. Also convenience. I'm able to sell any type of illicit goods on the dark web, take cryptocurrency. I don't have to go out on the street and deal with street gangs or anything like that. I can just do it out of the comfort of my own home. It's very convenient for me in that regard. Also transfer of value across borders. I can be a drug dealer in the Netherlands selling to somebody in the United States and taking Bitcoin, and it can be an extremely profitable operation for me as a drug dealer or any other kind of criminal. So obviously there are issues such as volatility, liquidity, and things like that when trying to cash out the proceeds from criminal activity in Bitcoin. But in general, I would say, no, I would say also the technology is, I guess it's a learning curve. So not every criminal can learn the technology or even want to learn the technology to be able to use it and not be, detected by law enforcement, because that requires a special type of technical knowledge. So in my eyes, Bitcoin has become successful in that regard. In terms of what people are calling it, a store of value or the transfer value, I don't think it's ideal, but it could get there with Lightning Network or RSK or whatever it is. But at this point, from my perspective, criminal activity is the best use case at this point for Bitcoin.
Thank you, Lily. So I think this is interesting. You started the panel with a yay. I want to turn to this side and ask the same question. So we got to hear some criminality behind this, some of the pitfalls. So with the yays, I'd love to hear just some of the potential hurdles, some of the potential disasters that this could bring.
Well, first I wanted to address what you had asked earlier. Like, is it the first question that you asked, the yay-sayers? That I do think that Bitcoin is, what was the question? Sorry. Why will Bitcoin succeed? I think that it's already succeeded, and that's obvious to everyone here now. And I think that it will continue to succeed because it was a genius invention, and it's something that I use. And if I'm using it, to me, it's succeeded. It's not based on what others think. If it's valuable to me and useful to me, that's what's important. And I think that's something we teach people from a young age. Don't listen to what others are saying. If it's something you like, then you like it. And if it's something you use, then you use it. I run an international company, and I have employees all around the world. And at the end of every month, it's a lot easier for me to pay all of them in Bitcoin, whether they're in the US or in Europe or wherever they are in the world. I use Bitcoin not for criminal activities, but for everyday things. I mean, I've booked flights with it, I've booked hotels, I pay employees. I bought my co-working space with crypto. It's a real thing to me.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And Tom, I want to be able to bring this to you and get to another level and allow you to have a comment. Since we've heard the entire panel thus far, I want you to have a word with where you feel this is pros and cons.
Well, I think everyone's comments are really what is swirling today in that whole debate. It's interesting because, and I was kind of talking to someone backstage about this, in 1999, when internet was established but still early, and mobile internet was coming on stage, one of the discussions we had at JP Morgan was, hey, because there were no killer apps actually back then, what is a killer app going to be? And someone said, well, if you look at Laserdisc and VHS beta, it's going to be because of either sports, gambling, or pornography, right? And strangely, it was actually correct, even though it sounded kind of lame. And I mean, in some ways, in crypto, it makes sense that that subversive side is where it's going to first take off, because mainstream isn't, is cutting off access, but it turns out blockchain works really well. I mean, it's a great way, as Cory said. I mean, XRP is a good way to transfer money and, for difficult currency pairs. And so I think the thing that we see as limitations for crypto today are going to be solved with time. And I think that mainstream usage will surpass dark web usage, and speculation will grow. I mean, today, for every dollar that people spend on GDP, 20 trillion, we just published the stats from the BIS, it is traded 96 times on speculation. That's why they call it Mrs. Nakamoto, right? FX is traded almost all on speculation. So for every dollar you spend, it's traded 96 times as speculation. For every drop of oil burned in a car, it's traded 30 times on an exchange on speculation. Today, it's only 2.5 times for Bitcoin. So there's room for a lot of speculation.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom.
And I know that you mentioned it in one of your articles, Lillian, that speculation has overtaken dark web usage?
Absolutely, yes, yes.
So guys, let me break this down to a kind of foundational concept. A lot of the conversation has been about Bitcoin. But really, we're talking about a series of technologies, and I want to make sure we have clear segmentation of blockchain is essentially an immutable ledger, right? And Lily, this is where some of your specialty is, both in the core ledger as well as offshoots of it. And then we have cryptocurrency as probably the most popular current use case, and then Bitcoin is an instantiation of that use case with which most people are familiar. Cory, I'd like to start with you, and then I'm going to kind of work down on this one, but help us understand Ripple in a bit more detail, specifically with how you guys have built this type of system and where you see these technologies fitting.
Yeah, my big pet peeve are the morons who cannot distinguish between Ripple, the enterprise software company, and XRP, the digital asset. Many of them are all over online. But I think that, fundamentally, I think we're at a stage where this peculiar thing happened with the creation of initially Bitcoin, and we look at XRP as Bitcoin 2.0, where there are a lot of the technological limitations of Bitcoin were fixed with XRP, which is why we've based some of our software solutions using XRP and not using Ether, not using Bitcoin, not using sort of other options out there, just because it closes transactions so much more quickly and can confirm transactions so much more efficiently. But I think that we are at a stage in this industry that a lot of comparisons are made to the internet, and I think that a lot of those are really right. And Tom, we were around for a lot of that too, so we saw a lot of that happen, and it definitely has a lot of familiarity. But I think the difference is that one of the important differences is in the very early days of the internet, the creators of it were academics, it was government, and the notion was we've got a superior technology. How do we propagate it? We'll make it free. And so the value kind of went up the stack. And value was not in the sort of the basic TCP/IP level. There wasn't a lot of money to be made in DNS or registries, but that hardware sellers, the Ciscos of the world that emerged, sold to telcos. Telcos made a lot of money, but the middleware, the Oracles of the world, and even in the Salesforce, there was a lot of value there. But really in the application layer, when you got to Facebook and you got to Amazon and you get to Google, that's where the money was made. So the creators of the very early, Bitcoin, XRP, Ether, they said, no. We're going to help incentivize people to join this by putting a dollar value on every block, a dollar value almost on the nodes of the network. And so then we go to my former employer, CNBC, and you get the great Bill Griffith, you get crazy Jim Cramer, my former colleague. Buy, sell, price charts up to the left. Literally the same graphics package, the same charts. And we look at that and we think, that's not sustainable. That's somehow all the other charts we've seen on this network, all the other ways we've looked at financial journalism, of which I was a practitioner, those things all blew up. Maybe this is going to blow up. Yeah. But I think that, when I look at that, I see an adoption curve. I see what we saw with dishwashers or the telephone or radio, and that it was a bumpy ride, but eventually these things led to a lot of adoption. Now, this may not continue forever, but I think that by attaching a price to the basic blocks, we get confused in the conversations we've had about things that we know from the past. This is different. But fundamentally, we've got to get to a point where we're not talking about stores of value or speculation, but where there are actual use cases of companies that are trying to solve problems, business problems that are unsolved by prior technologies.
It's great. Thank you.
And to Paul's point too, look, getting money and moving money in the developed world isn't terribly hard. No. The technological solutions aren't usually a lot better than working with U.S. dollars and euros and yen, but there are other problems that our global financial system have that the current systems haven't fixed, and I think XRP is a better solution, and Ripple's trying to write some software to help do that.
Let me extend on that, and Paul, if I can bring you into the conversation here and extend on the discussion we had backstage. So, you have a very unique ability to take complex economic theory, whether it's new trade theory or where you've won your Nobel Prize, and break it down for regular humans, right? Which can be challenging at times, and you've had decades of experience doing this. Is your foundational issue with Bitcoin as an algorithmically backed cryptocurrency, or is it with cryptocurrency in general? And then compound question, if we were to have a cryptocurrency that did work, what would be the fundamentals economically of that currency?
Okay. My big question, what problem does this solve, is a cryptocurrency generic question. Yeah. That's true of any of them. Now, the particular awkwardness of Bitcoin, the high transaction costs, the extremely high resource costs of adding to it, might be, and I'm still trying to grapple, it's with whether there's a sustainable way of avoiding those while retaining blockchain at some level. I have to admit that I have not, I've had people I trust tell me both sides of that. So you know.
The joys of crypto theology.
If I want a definitive answer, I can find somebody who will tell me that whatever answer I want is the definitive answer. So that's a little bit tricky. But I think that it really is but the question always is what problem it solves. If it doesn't, and I don't think any of these that there isn't a really deep problem. If it's actually possible to have a cryptocurrency that has got lower overhead than the existing monetary system, then fine. But if that happens, you know, we'll end up probably basically becoming part of that system. But that's fine. I mean, that's my issue. It's really. But I will say that if there's a better, you know, the distinction between the blockchain as a technique, which I'm still agnostic on, you know, I think a lot of the people here are here because they're invested both emotionally and literally in the value of Bitcoin, in the store of value function. So if you're saying, you know, don't worry about that because blockchain will take over even if Bitcoin goes to zero, I don't think that's going to be a whole lot of comfort to the people who are investing in it right now.
No, agreed.
I actually don't think a lot of people here are interested in the value of Bitcoin. I think that a lot of people here are interested in adoption of Bitcoin, and they want everyone to adopt it because they believe this is the future. Or, I mean, that's my opinion and my circle's opinion, and I kind of feel like this is my circle. Thanks, guys.
So to play devil's advocate to that, why is it that people would mass adopt Bitcoin, right? Besides, you know, the criminal activity that I said, that there's actually a benefit to using it, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to a regular person who, for example, I wanna use a credit card. If I use a credit card, I'm able to call the credit card company if I didn't like the service that I bought.
I can answer that right away because I've been in this position, and once I say it, I'm sure you will realize you too. My husband and I, he is Russian, so we spend a lot of time in Russia. Every time we go there, because Russia's the bad guys, even though there are a lot of our developers, our credit cards are shut down, and I can only call them during operating hours, and we have a very good credit card. It's only during operating hours, and it's not 24/7. It's supposed to be, but it's not. You're oftentimes sitting there on hold forever. Why? When I can just make a quick transaction with, I don't know, Ripple or whatever currency you want, Bitcoin, Ethereum, you make the transaction that you want without having to worry about these other people telling you what you can do or can't do because they don't like where you are and what you're spending. It's those types of things that I think make people want to adopt it because it's now, for the first time ever, people own the currency. It's us that own it, and it's us that have the power. It's no longer American Express or Wells Fargo. I think those are the reasons. I'm loving you guys today.
Tom, can I bring this to wrap with you? Jessica, thank you. It's great. I don't know what you're doing, but it's working well with the audience.
I don't know either. Maybe it's the green.
I don't get any love here.
So Tom, for you, you've got a long history as kind of being a pragmatic, albeit contrarian analyst and looking at markets. From your perspective, kind of extending on the commentary from everybody here, is it Bitcoin you're truly interested in? Is it crypto? Is it the blockchain? What truly is your position and your strong desire to make the suggestions you make?
Yeah. Well, you know, I think the narrative of crypto is difficult for non-crypto to really appreciate, right? Because unless you're steeped in it and really accept it, and especially if you're maybe even curious, it's hard to understand how to look at the space. So to me, we try to make it user-friendly. And I think one of the ways to look at this is it's a generational shift. Technology favors the new entrant, not the incumbent. But the platform consolidation, like, you know, in the internet, we did see it coalesce around, you know, a few platform technology companies, FANG, but they became monopolists. I think in crypto, because crypto time is faster, I think it's easy to now call one of the winners, in this election, which is Bitcoin, because it's been around 9 years. Blockchain's never been hacked. There's never been a 51% attack. That's, at least we know, that's been sustained. So it has a proven track record that is equivalent to 3 internet generations. And again, in FANG, it took less than 6 years for a new entrant to surpass Internet 1.0. It's been 9 years. There's been no challenge to Bitcoin. So I think Bitcoin is essentially the first core holding someone has to have. But without question, there's going to be a very rich ecosystem, whether it's for global settlements or people buying gaming, whether it's reputation protection. I mean, there's as I kind of mentioned on our slide, I think it's this $5 trillion a year market that's going to be displaced. Incrementally every decade, more growth is native digital. I was speaking to an economist, so by his best guess, 50% of global growth in the past 10 years was native digital. So that's financial and technology. In the next decade, let's just say it goes up to 70%. I'm just throwing this number. That's close to 30 trillion of incremental GDP that will be purely native digital. Why wouldn't it be native digital currencies that are, funding those systems? So, to me, it's just a big shift.
Good perspective. Thank you. Thank you,
So
Jessica.
I have a question that I'm going to direct to Cory, just because we accepted questions that people could email in and sort of talk about. Cryptonomics versus tokenomics. What's the difference? Is there a difference? And does it matter?
I mean,
And we'll open it up to everyone.
Part of my investing background, so I worked as a money manager for a while, and I focused on, I ran a short-only fund, or part of a short-only fund, and so I focused on finding shorts. I focused on finding companies that were overvalued, but in particular, if you find a company that's overvalued, then you're sort of guessing against the valuations of other investors. If you find a company that's a fraud or a scam, then you've got a better shot. So I was a specialist in finding fakes and frauds, and so it is interesting that this era of the early blockchain era has brought together a lot of people I've known for a long time. It's brought together also a lot of these people have come out from under rocks who have run stock frauds and such have resurfaced. The last story I wrote for Bloomberg News was a company that achieved a $4 billion market cap for a company that claimed to have a blockchain solution, but the people behind it used to run a company that supposedly stopped bedwetting. It was bedwetting, not blockchain expertise. This notion of securitization around a token that somehow doesn't involve securities laws seems ridiculous, and the SEC is only starting to get involved there. And so that sort of securitization around tokens, I think, is filled with scam artists, and they're separating investors from their money real fast, and there's always someone looking to do that. But again, I'll get back to this notion that we have a very active world of speculation around digital assets. What we don't have is a lot of use cases, but I think that it's just early days. Now, if we don't develop the use cases, I think these all go to zero. There was no reason, you had a presentation where you suggested, what if a certain percentage of the global investment assets went into crypto? Well, what if they went into Beanie Babies? There's no reason, there's no functional reason right now for them to go into crypto until we develop more use cases like Ripple. Ripple is further out ahead, I think, than just about any other company, and I'll add IBM and others into that, in developing actual very frequent use cases using cryptocurrencies, digital assets we call it, because we want to think about it in different ways. But until there are a lot of other companies out there doing that, this could be a flash in the pan.
Okay. And Lily,
Yeah.
Cory's talking about fraud and some of the interesting intersections, which I'm sure you see on a daily basis.
Well, I think a token or tokenized economy is kind of silly, if you ask me. I would say it would be equivalent to you going to a supermarket and having to pay dollars for your milk and rubles for your coffee and some euros for your gym membership.
Maybe rubles for your vodka.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make your life easier. Humans are lazy. All the revolutionary technology that has come about has played on that quality of ours, that we are lazy. We want our life to be easier. I don't want to have to go to the library to find information. I want to go on Google. I don't want to have to go to the store to buy something. I want to go on Amazon. You know, a credit card, same thing. You know, it's everything, every revolutionary technology will make our life easier. Having to use a token for every single app that I use, for everything in my life, it's cumbersome, it's not gonna happen. I just don't see it. I mean, you can, I guess you can argue otherwise, but I don't see it. What I would see, for example, if Bitcoin had, you know, the RSK Labs project where Bitcoin was able to run smart contracts as a side chain, and then I was able to use one currency for all my smart contracts, then yes, I would understand that. Or, you know, the continual development of Bitcoin, which is the only real decentralized cryptocurrency at the moment. I would understand that, but in terms of a tokenized economy, it makes zero sense to me.
Thank you.
Great. So I think if I, Jessica, go ahead, please.
Yeah, the question disappeared. I wrote it down though.
It was on cryptonomics versus tokenomics.
Okay, yeah, I see. So in my opinion, gosh, I'm sorry if this is really loud now. In my opinion, I'm seeing a lot of weird pressure from regulators to put all of these tokenomics into a securities kind of framework when this is actually something that's innovative and they need to create, well, I think once regulators become more educated, then they'll realize, yeah, we should have done that then. But in the future, they will realize they need to actually create a different type of framework, and there should be some regulations. And when they create this new type of framework for us, that's when I think that cryptocurrencies and tokens and everything will evolve into its natural path.
And we see other countries aren't waiting for this. I mean, the
Yeah.
U.S. is, you know, the IRS
we're
has said it's
last.
property, and the CFTC has said it's commodities, and the SEC is saying that some things are securities and some things aren't, and the rest.
Yeah,
most
and
of
they're
we're not,
conflicting
we're
in
not
each other.
saying. And you know, I think it makes sense. Look, the SEC wants to protect investors from getting scammed, and should, but this is something new, and they're wrestling with it. You know, we're very active talking to regulators all over the world, but what we see in places like Singapore and in Switzerland and Thailand and other places, they aren't waiting. And because the world is so much more global than it was even 5 or 10 years ago, you know, entrepreneurs that I see in Silicon Valley, they aren't waiting either. They're getting on planes and leaving. They're just going to go ahead and develop their companies. I argued against someone that this could never be, that you couldn't actually have a dominant global technology without it being in the U.S. And the person I was talking to said, tell that to Facebook and Google, which aren't in China.
Right.
They've developed a pretty good business without being in the biggest, one of the biggest global markets. So I still think I'm right. I usually think I'm right. But I think that the U.S. is, without having a clearer policy on how it's going to be governed, are risking having this major if this becomes a major technology, it might not happen here because of what's not happening in D.C.
I think you're right, and I definitely think that it's risky and possibly detrimental for all of us here, and that really sucks because I'm American, and I want to always say America has always been first, and we're #1 in innovation, but for the first time, I feel like, oh my God, we might be last at this, and we might not be okay in the end if we're last to pick up everything, because all of these big companies and amazing minds are just going to move away. I mean, look at how many people have excluded the U.S. from what they're creating.
So let me extend on that, if I can. So if I kind of pull and take an abstract of what this group has said, everybody seems pretty pro-blockchain as a foundational technology.
Yeah.
We seem to be, well, Paul, I get the feeling you're like this about a lot of things.
Yeah. No, I mean, I have yet to see a really compelling argument for blockchain as a superior solution. But I'm not, you know, I've read many articles that talk about how great it's going to be, but not a lot of concrete examples. So, but I'm not as, you know, I'm definitely negative on cryptocurrency, but blockchain more generally, not so much.
Got it.
You know, but I'm not going to endorse the notion that blockchain is the future of anything. I'm just less sure that it isn't.
But do you like its immutability? I mean, I'd be curious to hear.
Do
you like its immutability? Like the...
Of the blockchain?
Yeah.
No.
I'm not sure, because that comes at a cost. I mean, there's a lot to be said for. I mean, we've made a lot, done very well with essentially reputation-based systems have had, exploiting the fact that institutions and individuals have a future is something, that's a kind of a technology that we developed that's a very smart one. And blockchain is all about trying to run an economy without that. And why exactly would you want to do that?
I think blockchain is about, look, none of us really fully trust each other. Are you going to give me the keys to your house, or him or her? No, we are a society of people who don't trust each other, and blockchain creates this trust. And I can't say, I agree with you, it's not right for everything, but for example, my company, which I'll speak only for mine, blockchain is important because I think I was telling someone backstage, if you have a child with epilepsy, you really want to make sure that the CBD you're giving your child is real CBD. It's not high dosed in THC. And right now you go to a dispensary, you're buying a product that says, hi, give this to your kid with epilepsy. It's pure CBD, and I promise it's organic. They just wrote that on there. It's not always true. But with blockchain, you can prove that by looking at what the cultivator said on their smart contract that I said earlier in the lab and comparing those two things.
The amount, I think medicine has got to be one of the worst cases for this, because the problem with medicine is not so much that you can't trust medical providers to provide what they say they're providing, as the fact that none of us, almost none of us has enough information to make those decisions. There's a reason why we have TV shows about heroic doctors, and we don't have TV shows about heroic used car salesmen, because we rely upon doctors telling the truth.
But
now, sometimes they don't.
Doctors are killing so many people right now with opiates and...
But blockchain is not going to solve that problem. Blockchain is not going to make sure that the doctor does the right operation, right?
Okay, operations is a little different, but on something so basic that it now gives, the same way that cryptocurrency gives us the power to hold this crypto in our own. No one can take that. If I know my keys, no one's going to take it. Cut my hand off, I'll tolerate it. But same thing for blockchain. It gives us that same power that we're not going to listen to this doctor that says, take this for your back and take this for your hip and this for your foot. I want to find out the information for myself and find out the information that's in these pills or in this cannabis or whatever it is.
So Jessica, I want to reframe that. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
What you're really saying is transparency.
Transparency all the way.
So talk to us about that whole notion of farm to table, however you want to adapt that, and the sustainable definition of that, and how that goes into use. Because I think that's a little different than the esoteric argument.
Okay, yeah.
So talk to us on the transparency argument.
So transparency in terms of blockchain and what it can do, like for example, with my company, it can do everything from allowing a government body to say, how much electricity is this farmer consuming? And is this good for the environment? Is this bad? How much water is this person using? Now you can actually see this and track this, and you don't have to dig through paperwork or some weird files. If you're not even using Google Docs, you're using, I don't know, Word and
Excel.
Yeah, you're doing all of these old dated things. Now you have transparency. It's all here. It's on the blockchain. It's verified. Everyone can see it if they want. It's transparent. You can see.
Why does that matter to me as a consumer? Talk me through that part.
You as a consumer, maybe you are super eco-friendly and all about solar energy. Let's say you are just a fan of solar and you won't buy any products unless they are a solar product or grew it with solar energy. Now I can go to a dispensary, scan a QR code, and if I choose to look at the smart contract from the cultivator, I can look at what data I want about this plant. And if I choose to look at what they grew it with or where they grew it, and it says they grew indoor, I want to see what types of lighting they used, because if I find out it's solar lighting, I'm going to buy it. Right. I look at it and it's not solar lighting. Put it down, go to the next. The next one, they said that they grew with solar lighting, and I can see it, and it's verified on the blockchain, and there's been second verification. I'm buying it. It's something so small, but still so big, and it really is our future.
So you're holding these companies
accountable
to an EPNL, an environmental profit and loss.
Exactly.
All right.
I like the way you think.
I railroaded you.
No,
so
it's good. As you wish. So let me come back to the crypto discussion. And we're going to let, if you guys don't mind, we're going to let this panel run a little bit longer because this is just a great dialogue. When we saw the panelists we had today, the spectrum, we weren't quite sure how it was going to get, but I don't think it could get much better. So I wanted, if you guys would stick with us for a few more minutes, and Paul, I know you've got a flight command.
I've got a flight to catch.
I'll make sure you're off stage by 3 o'clock.
Okay.
Deal? Okay, so let's talk about crypto. Come one step up from the blockchain, and Jessica, points well taken. But on the crypto side, this notion, as a capitalist, right, and as an entrepreneur, I struggle with the notion that we're behind. So if you could change one thing about crypto to help us make it where it should be to adopt this, let's start on your side, Jessica. What would you change?
I think one thing that I would change, and I know it's actually being changed right now, we're working on it, we have amazing companies progressing towards this, but the one thing that I would change right now is the ease of it, because like you guys have said, I mean, in my opinion, it's pretty simple to use, but for maybe an older generation, it's really difficult for them to even wrap their head around it. I mean, my grandma still has her checkbook. She's definitely not using a credit card, and she's definitely not going to use crypto. So I think it's the ease, making this a lot easier for the older generation that we need to bring on board and teach them and show them how it is, because we all know that this young generation, they're playing World of Warcraft, they're buying plenty of things with their own crypto. It's easy for them. They get it. They grow up, they want to go to college, pay for their college with crypto, they want to pay for their books, pay for their dog walker. They want to do everything in crypto, and it's easy for them. But my biggest thing would be changing it for our older generation.
Is that a usability issue, or is that an availability issue?
Usability and availability. I guess it's kind of a, I mean, if you could buy your ticket here with crypto, then that's cool, but how many of them are coming here? It needs to be usability, like, where do they go? I don't know, Good. Olive Garden? Like, maybe they need to take that. And usability, because if Olive Garden takes it, how is this older person going to understand how to pay with it? So I think that's the one thing I would change.
Tom, how about you?
I think one of the negative byproducts of blockchain and distributed ledgers is that the point of loss is wallets, right? There's been 4 million Bitcoin lost. There's people misplacing private keys. You send it to the wrong address. You get scammed. There's Twitter scams everywhere, Telegram scams. And that's massive cost. I mean, it's billions a year. So I think what would be a very important development is the equivalent of either an arbitration entity or an insurance entity, so you can recover your lost money because of you're paying a small fee to protect yourself from larceny, or each of the blockchains starts to charge you a small fee that essentially acts as like an insurance fund. So
that's a good idea.
I don't know,
It's a great point.
Yeah, I like that.
Great point.
Oh, that's a new project, guys. Someone started.
So folks over here, anybody want to tackle that? Well, if you could change one thing about crypto, what would you change?
I mean, regulatory certainty is something that I think would really help the industry. I mean, and I think what you're pointing about, Tom, too, is that it hurts the industry. It's hard for someone to make a decision to develop. Venture capital money is flooding into this industry. At the same time, I think even more would be coming this way. There'd be more development if there were regulatory certainty about what's going to happen and how, and particularly the SEC is going to treat it. The SEC gave an early blessing to Bitcoin, gave a really interesting blessing to Ether, saying that Ether probably was a security and now isn't. So go forth and sin no more. This was kind of an amazing thing, but there's a lot. I think the rules of the road are not clear. I think we don't know, to mix my metaphors, where the white lines are and where the government is going to allow industry to develop. And until that happens, industry won't develop to the scale that it could otherwise. And I think that the SEC is close to that. I mean, there's a lot of talk. If you were asking financial people and speculators, the thing that they want the most is a solution around custody, so that they know that an institutional investor could invest in crypto, and there are suggestions that maybe someone like Goldman Sachs or UBS might have a solution right around the corner. That certainly would make a difference in terms of the price of certain crypto assets. I think the day that happens, Bitcoin, Ether, XRP, maybe Litecoin, you'll see a lot more trading of that. Now, there might be buy the rumor, sell the news, but I think that ultimately that will allow institutional assets to come into the space. I don't really care about that. I want the technological solutions. I think the price is the tail and the uses are the dog. We need to have some solutions that allow industry to develop.
Yeah.
Thanks, Cory.
Regulatory solutions.
Thank you. Lily, Paul, care to offer an opinion?
mean, just if there's a way to do this so that the transactions costs come down to, conventional means of payment, then that would remove at least my major objection. It wouldn't necessarily sell me on it, but it would say that the big objection would go away. I mean, right now it's just, for most purposes, a clearly inferior means of payment. And if there's a solution to that, fine.
Great, thank you.
And I think also to increase mass adoption, it's not as much about ease of use as more about motivation. Why do I want to use Bitcoin as opposed to the dollar? That's a lot more stable, less volatility. It's not going to change value, from 1 second to another.
Unless you're in Turkey.
Yeah, I was going to
Unless
say
you're
unless you're in Turkey. And who knows in the U.S., because I feel like there's some...
Right. So
tension
there
here.
are, for example, say if you're in, Venezuela and you have hyperinflation, you have a motivation to use Bitcoin, right? Because you want to store your value in something that, the entire world agrees has value, right? And that's a lot more liquid than, say, buying land or real estate. You can buy and sell it. So that's one type of motivation, right? But in terms of everyday use, like paying for things, like Paul said, we have Venmo, we have PayPal. They're very easy to use. If I, want to dispute a transaction, I can easily do that with PayPal. I cannot do that with Bitcoin. That's, one of the good and bad things about Bitcoin, right, in terms of mass adoption. Yeah. So, that's one of the biggest things, I think, is motivation, and also educating people on why Bitcoin has value, right? And at this point, to me, it only has value in situations where people are unable to put their money somewhere, for like in Venezuela or whenever there's hyperinflation. But in everyday use, it's too much of a learning curve for the everyday consumer to start using Bitcoin, in my opinion.
But
that's just the reality of things.
I think it'll turn into like what this Venmo and PayPal is doing. It will be the exact same thing in the future. It's only natural evolution. How far we've come from pebbles and stones and gold and dollars to crypto, I think it just seems normal. Are we done?
No. So guys, again, we've got about 5 minutes left,
okay.
and this is terrific, and I want to keep it going, but we do have to get Paul off stage. So I'm going to ask Denise to bring us home with a cleanup question, and then we'll wrap it.
I would like to ask, since you are naysayer, and we do have to get you off stage first. So if Bitcoin fails, what are some of the unintended consequences?
Okay.
Or are there any?
Well, look, any asset that that sees a sharp fall in the value is going to cause some disruptions. And then, so I think of it as there are two kinds of asset crashes. We had, dot-coms, and we had the housing bubble. Mm-hmm. Dot-com crash was kind of trouble for the economy, but it wasn't that serious. Mm-hmm. Housing bubble was, catastrophe.
Absolutely.
Question is Bitcoin more like the dot-com or the housing bubble? And we can talk a little bit about what was the difference. And there's really two big differences. The most important is whether the asset was purchased with lots of leverage, whether people who bought that asset were extending themselves, and particularly whether financial institutions were buying that asset or derivatives from it with leverage, which was not the case for dot-coms, but was very much the case for mortgage-backed securities. The reason that the housing crash in dollar terms wasn't that much bigger than the dot-com crash, but the knock-on consequences were vastly worse.
Absolutely.
Because of the leverage and all that. So, all right, at this point, Bitcoin looks much more like dot-coms than that. We don't have financial institutions really sticking their necks that far out. We certainly don't have that much leverage-based buying. And in terms of disruption of the payment system, if you guys are right, then Bitcoin becomes a big deal. That would become a big problem, but it's not now. Now it'd be a big disruption in the payment system for banned substances, but that's not something we worry about all that much. So I think it would be a shock to the system, but not a really big one. And remember just how much, we've had a lot of Bitcoin fluctuations. We were talking about the Turkish lira. We've had basically 4 Turkish lira level collapses in Bitcoin just over the past year, right? Followed by recoveries.
But those definitely weren't real Bitcoin people. It was big money coming in and people saying, I'm going to buy it at this and sell it when it hits this.
Yeah, well,
that wasn't real.
But the point is that my point here is that those have had, those have produced no, I was about to say ripple effect on the, sorry, on the
No pun
economy.
intended.
So, I don't think it's a big deal. I think at this point, if the naysayers, if suddenly people say, oh, this stuff is actually worthless and it becomes worthless, which it would, that's okay. Most of us, not the people in this room, but most of us really won't notice it.
So, Cory, you were 50-50. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, look, my CEO likes to point out that he owns some Bitcoin in his personal account. He thinks that there is a store of value. I think that, again, fundamentally, until the intrinsic value will be created by the use cases, and the use cases must lead ultimately. So we're further ahead developing an XRP than any other company out there, but there are other companies also using XRP to do other things with it. I think that, Bitcoin could fail and Ether could succeed. I think a lot of people in Brooklyn are making that argument every day. I think that XRP could succeed and other things could fail technologically because they're different. But fundamentally, it's got to be about use cases. We think that moving money across borders is a great hindrance to the global economy because it's slow and it's expensive and it's filled with errors. And we think the digital technology of XRP and the software that we've written that uses XRP can solve that problem. But until that's happening in size, the intrinsic value of the underlying assets, until other companies are developing in size, the intrinsic value won't be there.
Lilia, besides criminals cheering, is there another unintended consequence that you see if Bitcoin should fail?
If Bitcoin should fail,
I
I don't think anybody would care much.
Okay.
Well, I would.
Yeah.
I have a lot of money in that.
I'm going to.
I mean, in terms of obviously, the investors would care, but are you talking about Bitcoin or blockchain
this was
technology?
specific to Bitcoin. I know blockchain is a very different question, so we were just starting with Bitcoin.
And why would Bitcoin fail? In what regard? Fail as a store of value? Fail as a transfer of value?
I mean, I don't even think it could fail unless
depends.
somehow someone cracked its code. But it's open to the world's best hackers and cryptographers. I don't even know if that's a. What is it? Yeah, what does it mean?
I mean,
fails? I
maybe
don't know.
10 years from now, quantum computing will crack
that's what I was gonna
Bitcoin.
say.
Yeah.
Quantum
Then,
computing makes the whole thing.
But then
we
there'll
would
be a
in trouble,
fork.
right?
It'll be a Bitcoin quantum fork, I think, maybe.
Right, but okay.
Okay.
There's a problem with that, though.
Well, yeah.
There's no, if you keep forking Bitcoin, there's no guaranteed scarcity, which is one of the biggest,
Yeah. Well, none of us are. It's
values
proven
of
we're
Bitcoin.
humans. We can't
Well, they'll
predict
put
the
a
future.
miner on the sun to power that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I think that's all the time we've got because I get the feeling we could probably sit here and talk for quite a while, but we do have one gentleman that's got to get off stage,
Right.
and it wouldn't, two of you, and it wouldn't be the same without you. So a sincere thank you for a really great discussion. Round of applause for our panelists and our speakers.
Cheers, everybody.
Guys, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.